questions, participate. Have your camera on if you're decent. Well, I think we'll get started. We've got a pretty good turnout for starters. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Got kind of weird lighting today, but you can see my face okay, right? I'll try to stand a little closer. How many of you were in the KW meeting this morning? Just to kind of get a feel for who's coming from that. Okay, cool. So one of the things Charlie talked about today was that, you know, if you are really paying attention, if you're really setting yourself up for success, you are planning 90 days out. So with that being, keeping that in mind, you know, last week we talked about setting your goals for the fourth quarter, how to break things down into very actionable steps that you can do today, setting yourself up for success in terms of your time management and how you're breaking down your goals and setting your goals. And I think a big piece of really being able to pull that off that I've struggled with, found successes, kind of pulled from other sources, and also continue to work on is not just taking the time to set up those goals and not just taking the time to break them down into actionable steps and set them into your schedule, but also figuring out how to put myself in the best environment possible to actually get that stuff done. And not just to get that stuff done, but to stay focused on those things when life gets really distracting, when I have setbacks, when everything around me seems ridiculous in this world right now. How do I stay focused on what I need to get done? And it comes down to environment. And you know, I like to pull from The One Thing. That's a book that Gary Keller and Jay Papasan wrote about, well, it's a lot of things, but mainly it's about taking what's most important, that one little domino, that one task you should be working on that makes everything else easier or unnecessary, and really figuring out how to hone in on that and get that done consistently. That's really the key to great success. So I'm pulling from that book a little bit today. And if you haven't seen it, this is what it looks like. There's a couple different versions out there, but definitely worth a read. And more than anything, I use it as a resource. I'll go back and just look at pieces of it. It's a good reference material, and even better if you are somebody who needs something audio, is that they have a great podcast. So I highly recommend the One Thing podcast. It's really excellent when I'm driving between appointments or have a little free time or need something to refocus me. It's something I go back to pretty regularly. So one of the things in the book is what they call the 4 thieves. And the 4 thieves are 4 things that distract you or keep you from being productive. When there's a seasonal change, I am especially aware of how like the energy is changing around me. There's adjustments we need to make. Is anybody feeling that way right now? Like it's getting colder. People are like, you know, starting to talk about the holidays. There's a lot going on with the election, but there's just this like sort of upheaval of what I was set in for the last couple of months. You know, summer kind of hit a pattern, a flow. I was in that state, and now things have changed. And it's a really good opportunity when that happens to kind of rethink what you're doing, how you're doing it, where you're doing it, and what's going on within that environment. So I thought this was a really good time to talk about this. And, you know, when it comes to environment, it's not just the physical location, though we are going to talk about that in a good amount of that. I think is something that gets overlooked, you know, when we're talking about being productive or being effective, accomplishing your goals, but I think it's a huge piece. The other part of that too is the people. So it's place and it's people. And in order to get your one thing accomplished, or in order to make those steps towards your goals and to really achieve great success, you've got to have those things in place. So when it comes to people, I'm sure you've heard some of these things before, but it's essentially the attitude that you're surrounded by. So it's your friends and family, it's also your coworkers, your fellow agents, our office, that kind of environment and energy that's happening, that is a big piece of your environment. And even though we're not, for the most part, physically here, you're still affected by that, or you can choose to be or not. If you plug into the meeting on Tuesdays, for the most part, that is something that I think people find to be very energizing and very positive, gives them momentum. That's a great example of that people piece that can really help you with your productivity. Another, on the other side of that, is the distractions of other people, whether that's people in your own life or those that you seek out through social media or the media in general. If you fall down the rabbit hole of something really negative and energy draining, it can be very distracting and can make it really, really hard to have any sort of productive time in your day or in your week. So, people is a big piece of that. And it's good to keep that in mind. It's COVID, so most of us have either just our family or who we live with, or may have a small circle of people that you've spent time with. And it's a really interesting time to really focus in on who is in your immediate environment. Most of us are spending time with only a small number of people, and it's good to think about and reflect on how they're affecting your energy, your productivity, your focus, your momentum. So that's an important piece. The other part of it is place. And place is where you work. And it doesn't necessarily mean just one location. For me, for example, I'm currently in my office at our KW office, my little closet of blue walls here. And then I also have my workspace at home. I also work in my car sometimes, not when I'm driving, but I have a few different work environments, and you probably do or will as well. We are very mobile as agents, right? You're not sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day, not every day at least. You might have a work day during the week where you're really focused on that. But for the most part, if we're doing business, we're not sitting in one place all day. In fact, I don't like to. I like to be able to move around. I like to be able to kind of switch up my environment a little bit. Catherine and I were talking about this earlier. So it's good to have a little variety that might work best for you. But regardless, there should be some things in place that really help you get right to business, really stay on top of what's happening and not be distracted by the stuff around you. That can be hard. How many people are working from home pretty much exclusively right now? If you're doing work time, it's happening at home. Okay. And how many are also competing with learning from home, teaching from home, school from home at the same time? Or other people that are working from home? Okay. So it can be very challenging, and it may be the case that you don't really have the physical space to like close a door, have your own room. So it's even more important to have some things in place that make your workspace effortless, that make it a breath of fresh air, a place you like to go to, and a place where you can sit down and immediately focus on what needs to get done. Because if you have all these other things going on, you don't have 8 hours to sit down and work on stuff, right? You should really, think about your workday as like a 4-hour total office time, if you're fortunate to have that much time. The rest of it is family time and appointments and errands and transitioning from thing to thing. It's really not an 8-hour workday, and the less messing around with your space you have to do, the more efficient you'll be. Make sense? So to give you a little insight, if you haven't heard me say this before, I used to work in restaurants, and I used to manage restaurants, fine dining restaurants. I did that for about 8 years. I was fascinated by how chefs and cooks treated their workspace, about how they set themselves up for the day. about all the processes. I'm a very process oriented person. I love systems and processes. I'm super distracted naturally. So I need that kind of stuff in my life. And so I find it really interesting. It's how I've managed to make the most of my time. And I found that environment to be very interesting because a restaurant, once the dinner hour starts, in non-COVID times and people are in the dining room, it is on. There is no time to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. You are in it. There is very little time for mistakes. There's very little time for, oh, I forgot to do this thing, or I didn't put this on my station. You are going and you better be ready. And you don't get to stretch out how long it takes you to get ready because the dinner hour starts at the same time every day. So I was looking into what other books or resources I might be able to find to help me get some perspective on that. So chefs who are classically trained learn about something called mise en place. Has anybody heard this before? Mise en place. So it's MISENPLAC. Mise en place. And the shortened version that a lot of cooks or chefs will use is mise, like MEEZ, my mise. And essentially what that means is they're setting up everything they need for their shift, lunch hour, dinner hour, whatever it is. And so that means they're prepping all their ingredients. So they have little containers of like all the veggies they need for whatever they have on the menu, for all the meat items, for their seasonings. They've got their tools, their pots and pans. They've got everything they need set up and tidy and ready to go so that when that service starts, they're not chopping vegetables while they need to be cooking a steak. Make sense? So they've got everything set up and they have to work in a particular order. And I found this so interesting. And there's actually a book that I think is best used as a resource and not read cover to cover because it's really detailed. But it's called Work Clean. And if you find this interesting like I do, this is an interesting, different perspective on how to manage your space and your time and be efficient, not just in work, but in life. And so I pulled some information from this book that I thought was really applicable to how any of us work. And that is intended to be applicable to any, sort of translated to any sort of work as well. So if you think of your workspace as a place where you are kind of stuck for your shift, as you would be if you were cooking on a kitchen line. You're in your station, you got people on either side of you, there is no time for bathroom breaks, you are in that for a few hours. What do you need to set yourself up for success? How can you make that an environment you can work in? And generally it's a pretty small space and it's a very intense environment. So the more peaceful, the more organized, the more put together your space can be, the more effective you're going to be, and the more you can get done in a short amount of time, which isn't that what we all want to be able to do, right? Like if you can get all your stuff done in 4 hours and you don't have other work stuff to do that day, what other things could you do? You could do something nice for a past client. You could, paint a room. You could go for a walk. You could exercise, you could make dinner for your family. There's lots of things you could do with that extra time. And it's really a great incentive to say, if I can get all this stuff done, the most important things, I've got time for other things in my life. And that counterbalance is important too.
Anna, how do you balance that? Because I feel like in this business, and I'm sure you've encountered this, it's so easy to think like, oh my God, I could just be like, when you're not working, you're like, I should be working. What more can I be doing? Are there other things that I could be doing to drive my business? Like, how do you turn that mindset off and just have peace at the end of your 4-hour, 5-hour work day, knowing that, okay, I did everything today that I need to do in order to propel myself forward and not have that sense of guilt of like, wait, I could be doing more so you don't drive yourself to the ground?
That's a great question and something I fall victim to all the time.
Yeah.
I am not always the best example of how to turn off my work brain and just relax. And I cannot stress enough how important it is, how valuable it is, how effective it is to have that off time.
Right.
I can't stress it enough. And I often find myself in the position of being burned out and just running just like a hole into the ground, you know? And when I finally take a moment to step back, I realize a lot of that running into the ground, a lot of that worry and guilt is either things I didn't plan ahead for, and so they've fallen out of nowhere and they have to be done immediately when I should have planned ahead for them. But I didn't set up my week properly. I didn't set up my day the day before, whatever it is. Or they are small things that became big because I didn't include them in my plans, or they're small things that aren't that important. And I'm just so much in the hamster on a wheel mode at that point that I can't decipher what's more important, what can be done later, what I could have somebody else do. I'm just doing. I'm just in frantic squirrel mode at that point, which is not healthy or sustainable. So really, honestly, having a set place where I work, having a set routine and a wrap up for the day where I say, I am focused on these things today. I've done these things. I haven't accomplished these things. What can I do tomorrow? What does tomorrow look like? What can I realistically accomplish in that time tomorrow? And what can I let go of? And just giving myself that time to say, while I'm here at my desk, I'm going to lay out tomorrow. I'm going to look at my goals for the week, my most important activities, and all the other stuff. And I'm going to plot in some of those, stuff items for tomorrow. I'm going to make sure my most important things go at the top of the list and that I can realistically get those done in the time I have tomorrow. And remembering, if you were here last week, that those most important tasks, those things you've broken down from your major goals they are not urgent, but they're really important. Those things get appointments scheduled. So when you're plotting out your buyer consultations, your classes you're going to attend, your showing appointments, you're also plotting time when you're doing those most important things for the day. And it could just be one thing. If I can do this one thing, I've won the day. And if I do that at the beginning of the day, then even if I don't get some of that smaller stuff done, I am much more likely to be able to turn it off at the end of my workday because I know I got that one big thing done. Okay. And generally that's more long game, like I did that one thing. I don't immediately have a client today, but I know that's going to continue to build, and just trusting that being consistent, doing those things that will get you towards your goals are worth doing. And then being really thoughtful about sort of sifting through what the other things are. Okay. One of the things that I found to be helpful, I think I mentioned this last week, and having a really clean, easy to focus environment is key to this, is I'll use a timer. A Pomodoro timer is one that is great. It's basically you're working for 20 minutes, you take a 5-minute break, and every 3 or 4 cycles, you take a 20-minute break. And the timer helps me to realize I have a limited amount of time to do a task. And for the last 5 minutes, I'll go to that list of stuff that's just like quick, annoying things that aren't super important. And I'll just try to see how many I can get done in 5 minutes. It's amazing how much more efficient I am when I have a timer, a clean space to work, no distractions. I'm not sitting in front of the TV with a list of 15 things that I should be doing. I'm getting that stuff done in my focused work environment. And when I do those things, I am much more likely to be able to close the book on my workday and just relax. And relaxing is a task. It's an important thing you should be doing every day. Right. It's key. Yeah, good question. So in terms of your work environment, I know everybody has different kinds of spaces. For the most part, do people have some type of desk area or a spot on a table or something like that? Yeah. Okay, cool. So it doesn't have to be fancy, but it's good to have a space that you can leave the day before ready to go for the next day. And it might not mean that you're going to immediately sit down and work in that space. For me, I have a space in my kitchen on an island at the end of the day after I've filled out my planner for the next day. I've done my wrap up of the workday. I've set myself up for success for the next day. I leave it out open in the kitchen on the island because I know the first thing I'm going to do in the morning after I'm ready for the day is I'm going to leave the house. So I'm not going to sit down and work there, but I want this open so that after I wake up, I drink my water, I go do my yoga, I meditate, I come back, I check my planner for the day, make sure I'm set up for success. I do not touch my phone. I go get ready, and then I'm out the door. Take this with me. I either leave my work environment at the office here set up for me to be ready to focus and work, or I make sure I have what I need in my bag if I'm going to end up working from my car somewhere on the roadside because there's no open cafes right now. Or my space at home, my workspace at home. So if that's set up, it's cleared. I have one spot where I have my inbox, the stuff I need to work on for the day. So if I'm coming into the office at KW, I've got my spot where I put my inbox stuff. I pull it all out of my bag. I put it in the inbox. I have nothing in the outbox yet because I haven't done anything yet for the day. If I'm working in my car, I'm setting things out that I know I need to work on. I'm checking my planner, and then anything that's completed goes into my bag and out of the way. If I'm working from home, I've got that space. So having an area where I can set up an inbox and an outbox and not have much else in my way. It's nice to have like a comfy environment and something that's pleasing and cute. So, you know, you don't need an empty box to work in by any means, but it's good to not have the distractions of like projects that need to happen. A couple weeks ago, I had a big stack of stuff in here because I just moved and I thought I was moving things into this office. And then it turns out I didn't need that stuff here and I have to bring it back home. And I just didn't have the time to do it or didn't make time to do it. So I had a friend who is furloughed and was offering to help me come in and take that big pile, organize a couple things for me and get it out of here. And it's like a whole new space. Have you ever had that happen? There's like a box of stuff sitting somewhere, a pile of dirty clothes, whatever it is, that the whole time you're trying to work, it's just like whispering to you. You should be
Never
doing
even
this
my
first.
stuff. It's never
That's
mine.
my entire house right now.
Yeah, yeah. So it's got to be a place where you can either hide from that stuff or ensure that whatever is close or within your vision is handled. Because otherwise you'll spend all your energy resisting the urge to go do that thing instead of whatever you're doing right now. Because that thing's probably easier in comparison to what you're trying to do right now. And it's way less important than what you're trying to do right now. But when you have time later, there's other fun things and you don't want to do that thing. So it's just a whole ball of guilt. So make sure wherever you are, if you have to turn your desk to face away from the kitchen or whatever, do that. It needs to be a place where you can focus. So distractions and diversions, that's noises, that's things that need to get done, that's, you know, something you don't like. If it's like, you know, your desk is in a room that faces out to your neighbor's house and they have like 85 toys in their backyard and it makes you crazy, don't face your desk to that window. Distractions and diversions, clear that as much as you possibly can. Just give yourself a peaceful place where you can focus. You know, when you're looking at how you're using your time, having a timer can be helpful. I'd highly recommend not having your phone out. And this can be challenging if you're using your phone for the work you're doing. Then just make sure that however your phone is set up is in a way that you have a path of least resistance to the things, the essentials you need for work. So if that means the first page of your phone, all your apps are your MLS app, your showing time app, your calendar, your text and email, and nothing else, then scoot your Instagram to page 2 or 3, scoot your Facebook down the line. If this is not stuff that you need for work, put it in a different area, make it harder to get to, make the stuff you really need very easy. That streamlined process is something that cooks and chefs do all the time. You can see them physically set things in certain places to give them a path of least resistance, to require the least amount of energy and effort, to be as close as possible. Those little workstations are small for a reason. They're very efficient. You can turn around one way, you can grab all your ingredients, throw them in a pan, swing around 180 degrees, and you're in front of the stove. All
Amanda,
your pieces are in the right place. Yep.
You talked about scooting things like social media out. I'm thinking of Facebook, which is, there's a lot of KW North Shore on it. And 2 questions. One is like, how often do you check your KW North Shore? And second is like, if people are posting stuff about open houses on that, how would we keep track of that if we've scooted it over?
So if your task for the day is to get an open house, you could make, if I have to do any task on social media, when I'm being very good, I set a timer. You've got 5 minutes to get on here, do this thing, and get out, because otherwise I'm in 6 different things and I don't even know what I got on there for. When it comes to open houses, quite honestly, it's nice if people post that they have openings for open houses, but you're way better off being proactive about that. Figure out what area you want to be in, what price point you want to be in. Look on MLS and go to office listings. You can see every listing connected to our office. Find what you think would be a great listing to host an open house for. Should be like a more recent listing or one that just had a price drop or something like that. Contact that agent directly. Hey, I've been trying to farm my neighborhood. You've got a listing here. I'd love to host an open house. Would you be open to that? Would your seller be open to that?
I know there are also some,
Yep.
Sorry, there are also some bigger teams who have just an open house email every week. And if you show interest in wanting to host an open house and they think you'd be a good fit, they'll just add you to that weekly drops. So that's how I've been getting a lot of my open houses, and I can pick and choose based on, the 6 addresses they have for that week. And I found that super helpful. And then, early on in the week, they usually send it on Tuesdays, early on in the week, like what your plan is. So then you can strategize your open houses rather than, finding out Thursday, oh, I'm going to host an open house on Saturday. I haven't done any sort of like marketing strategy, anything to like try to drive business there too. So I found that helpful.
And that's a good point too, Catherine, is that, setting up your environment also is setting up your schedule, setting up your time. And if a good amount of listings come out on Tuesdays, or listings maybe come up for the weekend, you can find out in advance, especially if there's a team or an agent that you like working with, they like how you host their opens, you can start develop that relationship and make that part of your scheduled appointments on Tuesdays or on Wednesdays, that you're going to make sure you contact those agents, you find those listings you want to host, you schedule it, and then you plot out, okay, what do I have to do leading up to Saturday or Sunday to make sure that this open house is as successful as possible and gets you some good, social media coverage too. Yeah, absolutely. So if it's task specific, then give yourself a specific task to accomplish, give yourself a timer or watch your time. But most of the time, the stuff you should be doing to get yourself to your goals is oftentimes not checking social media regularly. It may be a thing you do on social media, but it should be a specific task and there should be a timeline to it, and you should get in and get out. So, and it depends on your personal ability to resist. I know I get really distracted, and I know that once I'm in work mode, I need every fence possible to keep me on task. So having that button so easily accessible to me is a problem. So I need to add another layer of resistance. So if you know, as much as it's important to have a path of least resistance to get things done, it's maybe necessary to set up some fences to other things that are distracting, which could be physical. You know, you could close your door, you could lock it, you could, you know, tuck your chair in under your desk so it's harder to get up and out. Whatever you have to do to keep yourself focused in that time, and realize that that's your golden hour, whatever it is. If you only have an hour, if you have 2 hours, if you have 4, I'm here, I'm fully focused, my environment is supporting what I need to get done. I'm here to get it done and be done. I'm not here to like lollygag through an 8-hour day and then wonder where it went and what did I do. Have you had that? I have.
So just to finish the question,
Mm-hmm.
so let's take KW North Shore on Facebook, for instance. How often would you say you check it a day?
Maybe once. I don't really need to know what's, I mean, it's more curiosity than anything. If I have a question, I'll ask a specific question of the person who can best answer it. If I have something I need to crowdsource, I'll put it out there knowing that by the end of the day, I should have an answer. Other than that, it's just, you know, it's a whole mix of stuff that goes on there. But if it's not specific to what I need to accomplish that day, my most important tasks, then I don't really need to be on there. It's just another social media distraction. It can be a great resource, but if I'm in my work time and that whatever I need to do doesn't apply specifically to that, I'm not constantly checking that. There's no reason.
Because Facebook's very tricky. They put up those 4 little icons and then they have a red mark next to them and you feel like, oh, I got to get rid of all my red marks.
Hide them. Don't have push notifications. Put that little icon somewhere else on your phone. They do that on purpose. They know how to manipulate us. So you've got to push back. You've got to set up a parameter that works for you. So one of the terms that came up in some of my reading was a time block bunker. And I thought that was a good way to kind of picture your space. So wherever you are, just knowing that this is a temporary amount of time and that there are certain things that you need to accomplish in that time period, and make sure that whatever you're trying to work on can actually get done in that time. Has anybody ever like given themselves like a list of 6 things and they're like, I have an hour, I'm just going to do as much as I can. Like, and then you get through like 2 and you feel bad because you didn't get them all done. And then you don't know if you should like keep going, or you kind of lose momentum. Has anybody had that happen? This is my natural inclination, is to make a giant list of things to do and then just like try to do stuff during the day. But there's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no thoughtful intention. There's no timed, I'm going to do this task for this amount of time. And part of it is not being aware of how long things take. And a good portion of it is not giving myself a set amount of time. If I've got a slower day, I always get less done. Always. If I don't have appointments to interrupt my kind of hanging out and sort of doing work, I don't get nearly as much done. So sometimes you have to create that sense of urgency and also be really aware of how much time you need for something. So outside of setting up an inbox and an outbox, there is something to be said for having like a clean and tidy space. The Work Clean book goes as far as saying you should, have a cloth and a spray bottle and like wipe down your space in between things. There's something sort of ritualistic about that, but it can be helpful, just a way to sort of clear your mind, take a moment between tasks and reset. For me, using that Pomodoro method where it's 20 minutes of work and a 5-minute break, that's my kind of clean slate, my brain moment, where usually I'll just take a little quick walk, just getting some fresh air, or that's a bathroom break, or refill my water, whatever it is. but it gives me that opportunity to sort of wipe away what the last task was and then have a clean space to focus on the new thing. In that same vein, when you start your day, having some kind of routine should also include giving yourself all the things you need so that you don't have an excuse to get up and go get water, or get up and go to the bathroom, or, oh, I need a Kleenex. Oh, and I don't have a garbage can. And now I'm wiping down the windowsills. And how did this happen? Give yourself all the things you need so that you don't really need to get up. And if that means there's someone at home who's also working or playing or learning and may need something from you, making sure they have those things before you get into your workflow as much as possible. I know that's not always easy with kids. But having all those things in place, your mise en place to start your projects, is key. If it means you have to have, a pen and a highlighter and a stapler, make sure you've got those things. If it means you need to have your laptop, make sure it's there and it's charged, or you have the cord and it's plugged in. If you need a phone charger, make sure it's there. Don't give yourself distractions that you could have avoided. There's some proactive nature to this, and it's becomes very habitual. So then it doesn't take much effort or thought at all. If you are going out into the world, this may mean that your workspace involves your bag or your wallet or your coat or whatever you're taking with you with your things. And you can treat that the same way. The day before, you do your planning, you set yourself up for success, you give yourself the opportunity to let go and turn off, knowing that you're all ready to go for the next day. Has anybody ever done this where you set everything out the night before, you've got your clothes, you've got all your things? This usually happens when I'm going on a trip and I have to get up early to fly and I don't want to forget anything. And everything happens and it's great. I don't even know what happened. I'm out the door, I've got everything I need. Versus the days when I'm I'm kind of tired, I'm not going to set out my clothes, I'm not going to put my stuff in my bag, I'll just wing it in the morning. And then ultimately I'm rushing, late, and I always forget something. Has that happened to you? So that falls into the same setting up your environment for success. And if you feel like you don't really have a place like that, you can make the office that place. You have to wear a mask, but you can come in. We've got open tables. It can get loud, so bring headphones and just set up your space right there. You can go downstairs. Most of the time there aren't things going on except for Ignite will be starting. But outside of that, there's table space down there. You don't have to have a home with a separate office. You don't have to pay for an office or a desk here. There are other areas where you can work too. It's really all about knowing, what do I need? What's my main focus today? How much time do I need to accomplish it? And then block everything else out. I'm getting my one thing done right now. This is the most important thing I need to work on today. I'm going to do it during a time that works best for me. For me, that's mornings before everybody starts bugging me about stuff. For some people, it's later in the evening after the kids have gone to bed. Figure out what works for you with your time frame or your timeline, but those are all important pieces. And having the people that'll support you in that is also key. So if you're here in the office and you're working on your thing, you can even put up a little sign that says, I'm working on my one thing. But if I see you, I will just give you a thumbs up. I'm here to support you. This is great. Keep going. Having people who will respect your time while you're working and also cheer you on and, let you talk about, oh, I felt so good about today. I got these things done. I set myself up for tomorrow. I'm ready to be present and just spend time with family now. And it's not going to be perfect every day. It's not. My days are not always perfect. My weeks are not always perfect. I fall off, I get back on. But if you know what you need to do, if you set up a path of least resistance, you give yourself some parameters and you create those habits and those rituals, it becomes easier. It becomes more frequently that I'm on task, setting myself up for success and getting stuff done than not. And I know when I fall off that I've got a very easy scenario to jump back into. I've got an environment that supports that. I just have to decide to jump back in. So we've got some time for questions. I'm curious what you found to be challenges as you're setting up your workspace, figuring out how to use your time and space, you know, supportive or not supportive people in your life. What things have you found to be helpful, effective, or not?
I have a question. How are you organizing your emails, files based on client? Like, how do you set all of that up so that I'm limiting the time where I'm looking at stuff? Like, I've done it a couple of different ways, but I'm wondering, you're all about efficiency, so
Yeah,
what have you found?
good question, Casey. So when it comes to files, when I'm doing a really great job, when I'm really on it, I have one file that is for my currently active clients. And when I meet with home buyers and sellers, I fill out an interview page on paper and I keep that in a file. I have photos of them. I have those saved to command. I have them in my phone for easy access, but I do have paper copies also. So I keep that in one main file that I go through like a monthly basis and kind of clear out whoever's already closed on selling or buying, or if they've changed their mind or whatever, just to kind of keep on top of that. I also have a Post-it board that goes along with that. Here, I'll show you. So these are my under contract people. These are my currently active people, from most active to least active. And here's a whole bunch of like coming up in different timeframes. So it kind of follows the file that I have. Anything else, I try to keep most of that digitally organized. And honestly, some of the like old stuff or the things that I've collected, I just have one main drawer where that stuff goes, and I go through it like quarterly or every 6 months if it's stuff that I don't need right now. So there is a resource for projects. I'll make sure it's labeled in a file, but then I kind of leave it be because I'm not here to spend time organizing files. I can pay somebody to do that if I really need them to, or I can make that part of my review process at the end of a period of time, quarter or 6 months. But yeah, that's about all I have for files. I'll carry around some of those pages for new clients. But other than that, everything goes into my planner. And then I've got a Google Drive that my assistant and I keep as a running sort of conversation. We check in on that once a week, and we have my biggest victories from the week, our progress towards our goals, what worked and what didn't. And then we talk about currently under contract clients. And then we have notes for each of those people. And then our active people who aren't under contract yet, we have notes for those people. So that's a running Google document that kind of ties into that file of current clients. We try to keep it simple. It's easy for me to get very complex about things, like a folder inside a folder inside a folder with a checklist. And it just gets to be too much. I try to streamline that stuff. Is that helpful?
Thanks.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions or thoughts on things that have worked or not worked for them? What kind of spaces are you working in right now? Do you have a desk? Do you have a space that you set up? Are you sitting on the couch in front of the TV at night trying to get stuff done? I've done it.
I do have a question. So I've heard two things. So some agents like wear it as a badge of pride that they work late and they're emailing all times of the night. I've also heard that people think it's unprofessional to be doing things like that. And it ties in perfectly with your current need or want to bring some semblance to like a work-life balance. Um, I have an 8-month-old who goes to bed at like 6:30, 7 o'clock. So from like 5 to 6:30, it's like my only time with her from daycare. And then I'm momming and making dinner and putting her to bed. So usually 7 o'clock is finding like I can like sit down and get more stuff done. Do you suggest that I put everything on schedule, like write all my emails if I want to work and like schedule the delivery? Like what would you suggest? Because you can delay your email sent.
Yeah.
How do you? I'm struggling with
So
that because I know my team lead doesn't want me to work after 7, but I'm like, yeah, but to me, my precious time is from 4:30 to 6:30. That's like different than yours because I have a kid.
mhm. So when I first started out in real estate, I was very opinionated about how other agents did their business. And the more I've worked in this business and the more listings I've gotten, the more people I've worked with, the more I realize that it is a little different for everybody, right? We all have different priorities, different people in our lives, different things that require our attention. So I've become much more understanding. So in my opinion, it's about when you can get stuff done. I think when it comes to time of night, I try not to text people after 9 p.m., ideally 8:30. And I choose whether a text that comes in after that time is really necessary to be answered in that moment, or if I wait till the next day. Um, it's to some extent you're training people when they can bother you and when it's okay and what your business hours are. So ideally when you're meeting with a buyer or a seller, you're telling them your business hours. Everybody else gets to have business hours, right? Like you don't call your doctor at 11 p.m. and you're like, I got this thing, can you look at it? Like that's not how that works. So it should be true for you too. And it's all about the boundaries you set. So setting up systems and setting up expectations for your clients is an important part of that too, as well as your co-brokes. And when I'm first initiating contact with another agent, I always say in an email, I prefer to be communicated with by text. That's the best way to reach me. If you are sending an email that needs an immediate attention, please text me so that I am sure to see it because I don't have alerts on my phone. I generally am not working after 9 p.m. and I'm in the office by 8 o'clock in the morning, but I'm working on things until 9 and I will reply to anything after 9. So I'm setting those parameters up in advance. As far as my most important thing for the day, I try to get that done earlier in the day. But there's a lot of communication back and forth stuff that has to happen, right? And a good amount of that happens after work hours because that's when people get home. So I personally, if I'm sending an email later at night, if it's before 9, I just do it. It's, everybody works at different times. Depending on how comfortable you are, you could say like, oh, this is my best time to get work done because I have a little one. Or you don't have to explain yourself. It's up to you. If it's after 9 p.m., usually I'll say, I don't typically send emails out after this time, but I saw this listing and thought of you. Or, this was a longer day, and so I'm just wrapping some things up just to make sure I'm not setting a precedence that I'm always working until 10:30 at night and they can just reach me then. But that pride of working late or working lots of hours, I think that's kind of an old school mentality that you are, the hardest worker is the person who works the most hours. I think that's BS. Gary Keller is very adamant about working smart instead of hard. And so everything that, that I've read it does, especially during the busy time. I'm a solo agent. I have a full-time assistant, but I don't have multiple people to do multiple things for me. So if I'm out on showings, writing an offer late at night, it happens. But I try to generally, my ideal week does not have me emailing late at night. I also find I make more mistakes late at night. I'm fried by that time, and that doesn't help anybody. But if it's just a general check-in, like here's where we are with this thing. Hey client, it's Tuesday, it's our Tuesday check-in day. Here's where we are with everything. If you're writing all that stuff at night and you want it to kick out to them in the morning, I don't see a problem with that. If it's time sensitive and you know that your client's an early riser, then maybe sending it later at night would be helpful to them because they'll see it first thing in the morning, or you set it to come out earlier. So a lot of it depends on the parameters you want to set for your work hours, the times that your client or your co-broke or whoever you're working with is actually going to be available and working, keeping that in mind too, and how they prefer to be communicated with. So there's kind of another layer to all of that. And it really comes down to your care of your clients and how well you're working with your co-broke agent, the lender, the title company, to make that a smooth process and to make them want to work with you again. Yeah, so if evening time is what works best for you, then that's your time.
Could you talk a little bit more about that? You said you have like a Google Doc for your active clients.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've only been in part of 2 transactions, so it's kind of like I've been focusing like one at a time, and I haven't really needed that. But hopefully that'll change. And can you kind of like go into more depth about what that looks like?
Yeah, so I've done a number of different things with this over time, and maybe a good topic for a full class too. When I was completely by myself and didn't have an assistant at all, or when my assistant was part-time and I was doing all my contract to close transactions, which was up until the beginning of this year, I tried a couple different methods. I had a spreadsheet which kind of showed me where people were in the process. I had just a notes page that I would update every week in my planner. The nice thing is Command is set up for you to know where people are in the transaction. So if you haven't spent much time in Command, I highly recommend playing around in there. Set up look at your past transactions or see if you can set up a test transaction. Call it test so it's really obvious. So if Kimmy has to review any documents or anything, she knows it's just a test. But it will, if you can get in the habit of using that system, the way it's supposed to continue is that will connect to the Kelly app. So, and it'll connect to your client's KW search app so that as you go through the process, they can see where they are within that timeline of accepted offer to closing. So that's something worth plugging into and seeing how that works for you. And then maybe you can supplement with like a notes page in the meantime. What we have is mainly to keep the 2 of us on the same page. So Liz, my assistant, works very much in Command, but because the mobile aspect of that isn't super efficient yet, I'm not in there as often. So our meeting on Monday and then our check-in on Thursday is when we go through that list. And it's really just to say, like, where are we with each of these people? All their important dates and deadlines for every step of the process goes into my calendar. So I know every day who has a deadline coming up, who has a closing coming up, that sort of thing. But our checklist is to say, okay, so this person is closing next week. We're waiting on the loan commitment from their lender. It's due tomorrow. I have reached out to the lender and asked when that will be sent out and haven't heard back yet. So it's just like a check-in of where I stand with everything. In Command, you can actually take notes on where you are with people. But use what works for you. If it's better to have kind of a running tally, when I was early in the business, it helped me to have all the steps spelled out. And then I just plugged in the people and what the due dates were. And then I kind of followed along with where I was in the process because I didn't have that memorized yet. So kind of walking through that just on like a piece of paper and filling it out, or on a document, or just checking the boxes in a spreadsheet, was a helpful way for me to just get in the mode of that. But I recommend trying Command, and if that doesn't work for you, maybe do something supplementary like that, just to stay on task so you don't miss any deadlines, or where you are in that process with all the emails flying around. It can get to be a lot once you have a few transactions all at the same time. Anybody else? We have a couple minutes. Are you feeling pretty good about your workspace? Does that all kind of already set up in a way that you feel like you can focus, you're not distracted, you're not too comfortable that you fall asleep, you're not so uncomfortable that you can't focus? All those pieces. It feels a little frivolous. I painted my office the color of the sky because there's no window in here. I did that so I could stay in here and focus for longer periods of time without losing my mind. So small things like that can make a big difference. Even if they feel a little self-indulgent, they're leading to something more important. It's a little domino to get me to the point of having a really supportive environment for my focus. So it may seem silly little things, but they are worthwhile. All right, well, we're about at time. I hope you found this helpful. I hope, if nothing else, this gave you something to rethink, or maybe a little project to add to your quarterly goals or things you're going to do over the next few weeks. It's a time of a new season. It's a time to refresh and renew what you're doing. It doesn't mean you have to overhaul everything, but maybe some small thing like setting up your workspace, moving your desk, talking to your family about your work hours, whatever it is to create that supportive environment. If you've been feeling a lot of resistance to accomplishing your goals, to getting your one thing done each day, to checking off those important things on the list, it might be because your environment's not a supportive one. So taking a little thinking time to consider what might be the sticking point, the distraction, is worthwhile, because it will make everything else easier or unnecessary, and that's the goal. So I hope you take some time to do that. If you have questions, if you'd like a little accountability check-in about this or your goals or setting yourself up for Q4, text me and set up an accountability call. It's about 20 minutes. I mean, just check in about where you are with your goals, what you're trying to accomplish, help you set up your projects or goals for the quarter, for the month, for the week. I am here for free to help you do that. And accountability is an important piece for making headway on those steps. So please feel free to do that. My phone number is going into the chat now. It's 414-534-7982. Text me, tell me your name, tell me you want to set up an accountability call, and when you're available, and we'll set up a time to do that. So I highly recommend taking advantage of that opportunity. Very few people do. Also, shout out to Bethany and Reagan, who turned in their GPS and their 411 from last week. They're great. They're awesome. One is like written down quickly on paper, the other one's typed up. It doesn't matter how it's put together. The fact that you did it is great. Super awesome. I hope that gives you some good momentum going into the last quarter of the year, which will give you that momentum you need in Q1 to have an awesome start to your year to really accomplish your goals. So congratulations on getting that done. That's a big accomplishment. Keep using that, go back to it. We've got an accountability call with Reagan I'm really looking forward to. So if you haven't done that yet, go ahead and do it. Those two, I've got planners for you, so we'll set up a time for you to get those. And everybody else, you can still do it. It's definitely worth doing. Make some time, set it up, set up your goals, watch the last video if you didn't attend class or you need a review, and give yourself a clean work environment to get it done, and it's going to make a big difference. So thank you, everybody. Have an awesome week. Have a wonderful start to the fourth quarter. We are off and running. This is how we're going to set ourselves up for success for next year. So this is a great time to focus on this kind of stuff. So have a great day. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Amanda.